The Forbidden Contact. In the year 2578, humanity stood on the brink of a golden age. After centuries of conflict and isolation, Earth had become a beacon of peace and cooperation among the stars. Alien races from across the galaxy visited Earth to exchange knowledge, culture, and technology. Among them were the Velerans, a species known for their unmatched beauty, elegance, and mysterious ways. Kira, a Veleran ambassador, stepped off her shimmering starship onto the Earth's soil. Her tall, slender figure was draped in a flowing silver robe that glimmered under the sunlight. Her violet eyes, a signature trait of her species, scanned the crowd of humans who had gathered to welcome her. She remained calm and composed, as her people were trained to suppress emotions from a young age. To the Velerans, emotions were seen as chaotic and unnecessary, a belief enforced by the neural suppressors embedded in their bodies. Kira's mission was simple: to negotiate a treaty that would allow Veleran technology to be shared with Earth in exchange for access to human medical advancements. It was a formal event, but something about this planet intrigued her. She had read about humans in Veleran archives, their strange behavior fueled by emotions like love, anger, and hope. It was a concept Velerans could not fully comprehend, but Kira found herself curious. The welcoming ceremony took place in a grand hall filled with Earth's leaders, scientists, and diplomats. Among them was Dr. Alex Carter, a renowned geneticist. Alex had spent years studying alien biology and was fascinated by the Velerans. When Kira entered the room, his eyes were drawn to her. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen, graceful, confident, and utterly unreadable. As the ceremony progressed, Kira delivered a flawless speech about unity and cooperation. Her voice was smooth and controlled, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than the stoic mask she wore. When the speeches ended, the attendees mingled, exchanging pleasantries and discussing their respective worlds. Alex gathered his courage and approached Kira. "Ambassador Kira," he began, offering a polite smile. "I'm Dr. Alex Carter. I specialize in xenobiology. It's an honor to meet you." Kira turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Dr. Carter," she said, her voice measured, "your work is well known among my people. The Veleran Council holds your research in high regard." Alex was taken aback. "I didn't realize the Velerans followed human science so closely." "We value knowledge," Kira replied. "Your studies on genetic adaptability have caught our attention." Their conversation was polite at first, filled with formalities. But as they spoke, Alex noticed something unusual. Kira's stoic demeanor seemed to waver slightly, as though she were struggling to maintain her composure. Her violet eyes lingered on him longer than necessary, and her responses became slower, as if she were processing emotions she didn't fully understand. Then it happened. A small accident, almost insignificant. Alex reached for a glass of water on the table, and Kira did the same. Their hands brushed for the briefest moment. To Alex, it was a simple touch, but to Kira, it was a shock to her very core. Her neural suppressor faltered, just for a second. In that moment, she felt something alien to her, a spark of warmth, a strange connection. Her breath caught, and she quickly withdrew her hand, her face betraying a flicker of confusion. "Are you all right?" Alex asked, noticing her reaction. "I am fine," Kira replied, though her voice was unsteady. She straightened her posture and regained her composure, but inside, her mind was racing. What was that feeling? Why did a mere touch from a human affect her so deeply? The rest of the evening passed uneventfully, but Kira couldn't shake the memory of that moment. When she returned to her starship later that night, she found herself replaying the encounter in her mind. Velerans were taught that emotions were a weakness, a flaw to be suppressed. Yet for the first time in her life, Kira wondered if her people had been wrong. Meanwhile, Alex couldn't stop thinking about Kira. There was something extraordinary about her, something he couldn't quite explain. He decided to learn more about the Velerans and their strict societal rules. His curiosity wasn't just professional, it was personal. As Kira stood by the window of her ship, gazing at Earth's vibrant night sky, she felt a strange pull toward the planet and the people who called it home. For a Velaran, this was dangerous territory. Yet, deep down, Kira knew she couldn't ignore the questions now swirling in her mind. What was it about humans that made them so different? And why did she feel so drawn to one of them? The seeds of an extraordinary connection had been planted, but neither Kira nor Alex could foresee the challenges and dangers that lay ahead. For them, this was just the beginning of a journey that would change their lives, and possibly their worlds, forever. The hidden connection. Kira sat in the quiet of her starship's quarters, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at the glowing orb in her palm. It was a neural stabilizer, a device that kept Velarans free from what they considered the chaos of emotions. But tonight, for the first time, the stabilizer felt like a prison. She had felt something during her brief interaction with Alex, something she couldn't explain but desperately wanted to understand. The Velaran way of life was strict. Their society valued order and logic above all else. Emotional suppressors were implanted at birth, ensuring their people never succumbed to irrationality. Love, anger, fear, all were considered relics of a primitive past. And yet, in that single moment of accidental contact with a human, Kira had experienced something forbidden: curiosity about the one thing her people had spent centuries erasing. Meanwhile, on Earth, Alex sat in his dimly lit lab, poring over everything he could find about Velarans. He wasn't just intrigued by Kira, he was captivated by the mystery of her kind. Velarans were known for their advanced technology, but very little was known about their biology. They were private, secretive even, and their laws forbade sharing personal or cultural details with outsiders. But Alex wasn't one to back away from a challenge. Velarans suppress emotions through neural implants, Alex muttered to himself, scrolling through a decades-old research paper. But why? What are they afraid of? The more he read, the more questions he had. If Velarans had evolved with the ability to feel emotions, why had they gone to such lengths to suppress them? And why did Kira seem different? Something about her reaction during their conversation hinted at a crack in her otherwise flawless facade. Kira, unable to sleep, decided to investigate her feelings further. She activated a holographic terminal and accessed the restricted Velaran archives. As an ambassador, she had clearance to view records most citizens couldn't. She searched for anything related to human emotions or interspecies interactions. What she found shocked her. Centuries ago, when Velarans first encountered other species, they were not the stoic beings they were now. Early records described Velarans as passionate, emotional, and deeply connected to those around them. They had even engaged in relationships with other species, including humans. But something had changed. A catastrophic event, shrouded in secrecy, had led to the development of the suppressors. The records hinted at chaos, betrayal, and loss, but the details were missing, deliberately erased. Kira leaned back, her heart racing. Could it be that her people had chosen to erase part of themselves out of fear? And if so, what had they lost in the process? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime. A message appeared on her console. Incoming communication from Dr. Alex Carter. Kira hesitated. Velaran protocol forbade unauthorized contact with humans outside official duties, but something about Alex's message drew her in. She tapped the screen, and his face appeared in a small holographic window. "Ambassador Kira," Alex said, his voice warm but cautious. "I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to apologize if I offended you earlier. That wasn't my intention." Kira regarded him silently for a moment. "You did not offend me, Dr. Carter," she replied, her tone neutral. "But your curiosity is unusual." Alex smiled. "Curiosity is what drives humans. We ask questions, even when we're not supposed to." Kira tilted her head. "And what question are you asking now?" Alex hesitated, then said, "Why do Velarans suppress their emotions? What are you afraid of?" The question hit Kira like a bolt of lightning. No human had ever dared to ask her something so direct, so personal. She could have ended the call, reported him to her superiors, and moved on. But instead, she found herself answering. "We are not afraid," she said slowly, choosing her words carefully. "We value order. Emotions disrupt that order. They lead to conflict, instability, and pain. But they also lead to connection," Alex countered. "To love, hope, and understanding. Isn't that worth the risk?" Kira looked away, her mind racing. She wanted to dismiss his words as naive, but part of her couldn't. That brief touch earlier had shown her something. A connection she had never felt before. Could he be right? Had her people given up too much in their pursuit of order? "Why do you care, Dr. Carter?" she asked, her voice softer now. Alex leaned closer to the camera. "Because I think there's more to you than you realize, and I think you want to know what it is." Kira ended the call without responding, but Alex's words lingered in her mind. That night, she made a decision that would change everything. She would deactivate her suppressor, just for a short time, just to see what it was like to feel without limits. As she prepared for the procedure, a deep sense of unease settled over her. If her superiors discovered what she was about to do, the consequences would be severe. But curiosity burned within her like a fire she couldn't extinguish. Somewhere on Earth, Alex was staring at his computer screen, wondering if he had just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Both of them were about to embark on a journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves, their worlds, and the connection between them. The forbidden experiment. Kira sat alone in the dimly lit chamber of her starship, staring at the small silver device in her hand. The suppressor implant nestled beneath her skin had been with her since birth, muting emotions she was only now beginning to glimpse. Her encounter with Alex had stirred something inside her, a curiosity she couldn't suppress, no matter how hard she tried. Tonight, she would do the unthinkable, deactivate the suppressor. Velaran law was clear. Emotional suppression was the foundation of their society. Removing or tampering with the implant was considered a crime punishable by exile or worse. Yet Kira's mind was made up. She needed to understand what humans felt and why they lived with such chaotic intensity. Her hands trembled as she activated the small device Alex had sent her, a tool designed to safely deactivate neural suppressors for research purposes. The moment she pressed the button, her world changed. A wave of sensations crashed over her like a tidal wave. Her chest tightened, and tears welled up in her eyes. Tears she didn't know she could produce. The sterile walls of her chamber seemed brighter, almost alive, and her thoughts, once orderly and precise, swirled in a chaotic storm of memories and feelings. She gasped, clutching her chest, as the first genuine emotion she had ever felt surged through her. Fear. On Earth, Alex was pacing his lab, unable to sleep. He had sent Kira the deactivation tool with detailed instructions, knowing full well the risks she was taking. He couldn't shake the image of her face during their last conversation, the flicker of curiosity and vulnerability she had let slip. He wanted to know if she would go through with it, but more than that, he wanted to know what she would feel. Suddenly, his communication device buzzed. It was a private channel he had set up for Kira. He rushed to answer, his heart pounding. Her holographic image appeared, and he immediately noticed the change. Her composed, stoic expression was gone. Her violet eyes glistened with unspoken emotions, her face flushed with something he couldn't quite place. "Kira," Alex said, his voice cautious, "are you all right?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "No, and yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I feel everything." Alex leaned forward, his concern evident. "What do you mean? What are you feeling?" "I don't have the words," she said, pressing her hands to her chest. "It's overwhelming. Fear, sadness, joy. It's all here, all at once. How do humans live like this?" Alex smiled gently. "It's It's not always easy, but it's what makes us who we are. Emotions help us connect with each other, understand ourselves, and face the world. Kira stared at him, her tears slowing. Connection, she murmured. That's what I felt when we touched. I didn't understand it then, but now, it's so powerful. Over the next few days, Kira experimented cautiously with her newfound emotions. She began noticing details she had previously ignored. The subtle beauty of Earth's night sky, the faint hum of her ship's engines, the sound of her own heartbeat. Every sensation felt sharper, richer, and more alive. She started journaling her thoughts, a practice she had read about in human culture, trying to make sense of her chaotic mind. But her actions did not go unnoticed. Velaran authorities monitoring her ship's systems detected irregular neural activity. The council became suspicious, suspecting Kira was hiding something. They dispatched an enforcement team to investigate, warning her that any deviation from protocol would result in immediate recall to Velara Prime. Kira received the warning with a calm exterior, but inside, panic bubbled. She reached out to Alex for guidance. "They're onto me," she said during a late-night call. "They'll know what I've done." Alex's mind raced. "You need to be careful, Kira. If they discover you've deactivated the suppressor, I'll be exiled or worse," she finished, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "But Alex, I can't go back to the way I was." "I won't." Alex nodded, admiration mixing with worry. "Then we need to figure out how to protect you. There has to be a way to prove that what you're experiencing isn't a threat." Kira frowned. "The council won't care about proof. To them, I've already betrayed everything our society stands for." "Then we'll have to make them listen," Alex said firmly. "But first, you need to keep them from finding out what you've done." Kira hesitated, then nodded. "I'll erase the evidence from my ship's systems, but I need your help to understand what's happening to me. These emotions, they're powerful, but they're also terrifying." Alex smiled reassuringly. "You're not alone in this, Kira. We'll figure it out together." As Kira worked to cover her tracks, she found herself growing more drawn to Alex. Their conversations, once formal and diplomatic, became deeply personal. She began to see the world through his eyes, understanding the beauty and pain of human existence. For Alex, Kira became more than just an alien ambassador. She became a symbol of hope, proof that even the most rigid beliefs could be challenged. But their growing connection came at a cost. The Velaran enforcement team was closing in, and Kira knew it was only a matter of time before they discovered the truth. She had crossed a line her people would never forgive, and the consequences would be severe. For now, she clung to the one thing that kept her grounded. The connection she had found with Alex. It was fragile, uncertain, and utterly forbidden, but it was also the most real thing she had ever known. As the shadows of Velaran judgment loomed closer, Kira and Alex prepared for the fight of their lives, knowing that their actions could change the fate of their worlds forever. The emotional awakening. Kira stood at the observation window of her starship, her mind a storm of emotions. Since deactivating her neural suppressor, she had been overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of feelings. It was as though a curtain had been pulled back, revealing a world she had never truly seen before. Joy, sadness, fear, excitement. Each emotion crashed over her in waves, leaving her dizzy, disoriented, and at times even terrified. But there was also a strange beauty in it. The world outside the window no longer seemed cold and mechanical. It was vibrant, full of possibilities, and impossibly complex. Yet, despite this new awareness, Kira couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Her people, the Velarans, had created a society based on control. Their emotions were carefully suppressed, their lives orderly, predictable, and safe. But Kira was no longer sure that this was the right way to live. Alex, on the other hand, was growing increasingly concerned. He had seen the changes in Kira since their first contact. Her earlier composure had given way to a vulnerability he hadn't expected. She no longer hid behind her stoic demeanor, but allowed herself to feel. And in doing so, she was beginning to question everything she had known. Their nightly conversations had become more intimate, less about the treaty and more about their personal lives, their fears and hopes. Alex found himself sharing his own experiences, stories of human relationships, love, loss, and dreams of a future that seemed distant in the face of their current struggle. "I don't understand how you live like this, Alex," Kira had said during one of their calls. "Emotions are so overwhelming, so chaotic. How can you focus on anything when you feel everything at once?" Alex had smiled softly. "It's not easy, I won't lie. But emotions make us human, Kira. They shape who we are. Without them, we would be like machines, disconnected from each other." Kira had fallen silent, contemplating his words. In truth, part of her didn't want to return to the Valoran way of life. The thought of suppressing everything again felt like a betrayal of what she had discovered about herself. Yet there was also fear. What would her people think if they found out? How could she explain the transformation she had undergone? As the days passed, Kira grew more and more fascinated by human emotions. She began to study them, not just through Alex's explanations, but by observing the people around her, human diplomats, scientists, and even the crew members who maintained her ship. Their expressions, their interactions, the way they spoke with such raw emotion, it was all so foreign to her. Yet she couldn't tear herself away. One evening, as she walked through the halls of the embassy on Earth, she noticed a couple arguing in a quiet corner. Their voices were raised, their faces flushed with anger. Yet there was something deeply intimate about their confrontation. They weren't just exchanging words. They were exposing their deepest fears, their insecurities. Kira watched, captivated. She had never seen Velorans argue like this. Disagreements in her culture were handled with cold logic, each side presenting facts, never emotions. But these humans, they were speaking from their hearts, and despite the anger in their voices, there was something incredibly powerful about it. Kira found herself drawn to their energy, fascinated by the complexity of their connection. It was as if their emotions were not weaknesses but strength, allowing them to build deeper, more genuine bonds. Later that evening, Alex called her. There was a new urgency in his voice. "Kira, I need you to understand something," he said. "I've been thinking a lot about your situation, about you, and I think I've figured out why the suppressor affects you so much." Kira listened intently. "What do you mean?" "The suppressor doesn't just limit your emotions, Kira. It disconnects you from yourself. It keeps you from experiencing the full range of what it means to be alive. That's why you're so overwhelmed now. You've been living in a shell, hiding from the truth of who you are." Kira felt a chill run through her. "So you're saying I was broken?" Alex hesitated. "Not broken, just incomplete. You've spent your whole life trying to fit into a mold that doesn't allow you to feel. But now that you're free, it's like you're discovering who you really are. And it's terrifying, I know. But it's also beautiful." Kira's heart pounded as she absorbed his words. The truth was, she didn't know what to feel anymore. She had lived her life according to the rules of her people, suppressing every emotion. But now that she was experiencing them all, the flood was both intoxicating and terrifying. What would happen if she allowed herself to embrace them fully? The next day, Kira decided to confront her growing confusion. She walked through the human city where the embassy was located, her mind still swirling with the emotions she had been trying to understand. The bright lights, the sounds of laughter, the bustling streets, all of it seemed so alive, so real. But amid the chaos, she also felt a strange sense of peace. She could sense the rhythm of the city, how its people were tied together by invisible threads of emotion. It wasn't just a physical place, it was an emotional one too. She paused at a small cafe, observing a young woman talking with a friend. The woman's face lit up with joy as she laughed, and Kira felt a surge of warmth in her chest. The simple act of laughter, something so small, yet so profound, was a revelation to her. She had never realized how much emotion shaped human interactions. That night, when Kira sat in her private chamber, she allowed herself to reflect. The emotions she had felt so far had been overwhelming. Fear, sadness, joy, longing. But now, there was also something else. Wonder at the vastness of the emotional landscape, at the depth of what humans could feel. She wasn't just seeing the world for the first time. She was experiencing it. But even as she felt a new sense of freedom, she also felt a knot of dread forming in her stomach. Her actions were becoming harder to hide. The Velaran authorities were watching, and soon, they would notice her growing emotional instability. She couldn't go back to the way things were, but she wasn't sure she was ready to face the consequences of her choices either. Alex's words echoed in her mind. Emotions make us human, Kira. They shape who we are. Was she willing to risk everything? Her place in Velaran society, her future, and her connection with Alex, for the chance to truly live? Kira didn't have the answers yet, but for the first time she didn't feel the need to suppress her questions. Whatever came next, she was ready to face it. The great betrayal. The tension between Kira and her Velaran superiors had been building for weeks. She had done everything she could to maintain her composure, hiding the emotional awakening she was experiencing. But it was becoming harder to keep her new reality a secret. She was no longer the perfect, emotionless Velaran diplomat they expected her to be. Every day, she found herself drawn more to the human emotions that Alex had helped her understand. And every day, her connection with him deepened. She no longer felt like a spectator in life. She was living it. But her growing connection with Alex and her new emotional state were not without consequences. As Kira walked through the corridors of her starship one afternoon, her hand brushing against the cool walls, a voice from the shadows startled her. Ambassador Kira. She turned to face Captain Raylan, the stern leader of the Velaran security detail assigned to protect her. His eyes, usually impassive, flickered with suspicion. We need to talk. Kira's heart skipped a beat. She knew this conversation was inevitable. The Velaran authorities had been monitoring her activities closely, and there were no more excuses she could make. She followed Raylan to a private chamber where the conversation took an uncomfortable turn. We've noticed irregularities in your neural readings, Captain Raylan said bluntly, his voice low and dangerous. You've been tampering with your suppressor. You've broken the laws of Velaran society. Kira's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she thought she might faint. She had expected this moment to come, but she hadn't been prepared for how real it would feel. Her people, the ones she had been raised to trust and obey, were now the very ones who would condemn her. I've done nothing wrong, Kira said, her voice steady despite the rising panic inside her. I've simply been learning more about human emotions. Raylan's expression hardened. You've been compromised, Kira. If this continues, it will endanger the peace agreement with Earth. It could destabilize everything we've worked for. You are no longer fit to serve as an ambassador. Kira's world tilted. She had always believed in her mission, in the importance of maintaining peace between the Velarans and humans. But now, as she looked into Raylan's cold eyes, she realized how small and limited her people's worldview had become. They feared what they didn't understand, what they had never allowed themselves to feel. You can't do this, Kira said, her voice wavering as emotion surged in her chest. I've learned so much from humans. They're not weak for feeling. They're strong. Their emotions give them purpose, depth, and connection. Raylan's eyes narrowed. You are no longer a Velaran, Kira. You've betrayed us. You will be recalled to Velara Prime immediately. Alex had sensed something was wrong. The frequency of Kira's communications had dropped dramatically. She had promised to be cautious, but he could feel the weight of her silence pressing on him. He sat in his lab, pacing back and forth, wondering how long they could keep this secret before the Velarans discovered the truth. Then, one evening, his communicator buzzed with an urgent message. The holographic image of Kira appeared before him, but something was different. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with fear. "Alex," Kira's voice trembled. "I need your help. They know what I've done." Alex's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? What happened?" "They found out that I've deactivated my suppressor," Kira said, her voice breaking. "They're taking me back to Velara Prime. They say I've betrayed everything we've worked for. They say I'm a danger to the peace with Earth." Alex's mind raced. He knew the consequences for Kira if she were taken back to Velara Prime. It wasn't just about her position as an ambassador. It was about her very survival. The Velarans were ruthless when it came to enforcing their laws, and a betrayal like this could lead to her being exiled, or worse. "We can't let them take you, Kira," Alex said, his voice resolute. "I won't let them take you." Kira's eyes widened. "But how? I'm on a Velaran vessel. Even if you found me, there's no way to escape without being caught." "I don't care about the risks," Alex said firmly. "I'll find a way. We'll find a way." As the days passed, Kira's situation grew more dire. The Velaran authorities had already begun preparing for her recall, and she knew it was only a matter of time before they would send her back to their homeworld to face the consequences of her actions. Her once calm and controlled existence had crumbled, and in its place was a new reality, one that was chaotic, unpredictable, and utterly human. But Kira wasn't ready to give up. She had come too far to turn back now. The emotion she had experienced, fear, joy, love, had opened her eyes to a new world, a world where connection and vulnerability were more important than logic and control. And she wasn't about to lose that now. She reached out to Alex one last time, her voice trembling with both fear and determination. "Alex, I need you to get me out of here. If they take me back, I'll never be the same. I won't survive their punishment." Alex, already planning a daring rescue, didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way. You're not alone in this, Kira. We'll make it through this together." The moment Kira was placed in the holding chamber, she knew the time had come. She could feel the weight of her actions bearing down on her. She had defied her people, her culture, and the very laws that governed their lives. But as the door to the chamber sealed shut, Kira's resolve only strengthened. She had discovered something far more important than obedience. She had discovered herself and a connection she shared with Alex. Across the galaxy, in the depths of space, Alex was preparing for the most dangerous mission of his life. He would infiltrate the Velaran stronghold, risking everything to save Kira from the fate that awaited her. It was a reckless plan, one that could destroy the fragile peace between Earth and the Velarans. But for Alex, there was no other choice. They were about to embark on a path that would forever change the fate of their worlds. And as Kira awaited her fate in the cold, sterile cell, she knew one thing for certain. She had chosen to live, to feel, and to fight for the future she believed in. The ultimate sacrifice. The days stretched on, each one heavier than the last. Kira's mind was a whirlwind of uncertainty, but there was one thing she knew for sure. She could no longer go back to the life she had once known. The emotion she had felt, the connection she had made, had changed her irrevocably. The suffocating coldness of Velaran society felt more alien with each passing hour. She sat in her small, sterile holding cell aboard the Velaran ship, her heart pounding as she stared at the cold metal walls. Time seemed to slow in the silence of her confinement. A part of her wondered if Alex had abandoned the rescue plan. After all, the Velarans were not known for mercy. Her fate, it seemed, had already been decided. She was a traitor, an anomaly that threatened the delicate peace between humans and Velarans. The suppression of emotions had been the core of her people's existence for generations. Her very existence now threatened that order. Kira's mind wandered back to the first time she had met Alex, the touch of his hand, the warmth in his eyes, and the way he had looked at her as if she were not a creature to be feared, but a person to be understood. That moment, brief as it had been, had cracked something open inside her. The power of connection, the beauty of human emotion, had been the key to her transformation. Now she could never go back to a life where she wasn't allowed to feel. She would never again let her emotions be suppressed. She thought of her people, her family, her friends, and the society that had shaped her. How could she explain what had happened to her? How could she make them understand the strength she had found in her emotions? It was all so confusing, yet in the midst of it, there was clarity. She could not go back. On Earth, Alex was preparing for what could very well be the most dangerous mission he would ever undertake. He had spent weeks gathering the necessary resources and allies, sleepless nights spent poring over Valoran schematics and devising a plan that would not only save Kira, but also ensure her survival. There was no room for error. Alex had always been resourceful, but this mission felt different. It wasn't just about intelligence or gadgets. It was about saving the one person who had come to mean more to him than anyone he had ever known. It wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a fight for Kira's right to live as she was, to embrace the human emotions she had come to cherish. In the darkened lab, Alex stood over a holographic map of the Valoran starship. He had connected with several trusted allies, rogue Valoran scientists who opposed the emotional suppression laws. They had helped him find a weak spot in the ship's security, an area where Kira was being held. The plan was simple, yet incredibly risky. Infiltrate the ship's lower levels, disable the security systems, and get Kira out before they could stop him. His heart was heavy with the weight of the task, but there was no turning back now. Kira was his responsibility. Kira was shaken from her thoughts by the sound of footsteps approaching. The door to her cell slid open with a sharp hiss, revealing two Valoran enforcers. Their cold, impassive faces showed no emotion, but Kira could feel their eyes on her, judgment in every gaze. "Ambassador Kira," one of them said, his voice flat and unfeeling. "The Council has made its decision. You are to be escorted to Velara Prime immediately for your trial. Your actions have endangered the peace between Valoran and human nations. There is no turning back." Kira stood slowly, her pulse quickening. She wanted to scream, to fight, to escape, but she knew better. Fighting would only make things worse. Instead, she took a deep breath and steeled herself. She had made her choice, and now she would face the consequences. As the guards led her down the corridor, Kira's thoughts swirled with dread. The trial on Velara Prime would be a formality, a prelude to her exile. There was no question that the Valoran authorities would strip her of everything: her title, her status, her connections. Her life as she knew it would be over. But then, something changed. As they neared the ship's docking bay, Kira's sharp ears picked up the faintest sound: footsteps, echoing through the halls, hurried and deliberate. A sense of danger surged within her. It couldn't be. Was someone coming for her? Back on Earth, Alex was moving quickly. His heart raced as he navigated the dark hallways of the Valoran ship. His team had disabled the outer security layers, but the hardest part was yet to come. The deeper he went into the ship, the more he could feel the weight of the risk pressing down on him. If they were caught, it would mean the end of everything, not just for Kira, but for the fragile peace they had fought so hard to maintain. Alex reached the door that led to Kira's holding cell, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He checked his equipment one last time. He wasn't afraid, but he was aware of the stakes. This wasn't just about saving Kira anymore. This was about challenging everything the Valoran stood for and showing them that emotions weren't a weakness. They were a strength. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and there, in the dim light of the chamber, stood Kira. Her eyes widened as she recognized him. And for a moment, neither of them moved. She seemed so fragile, standing there, yet in her eyes was the same fierce determination that had drawn him to her in the first place. "Kira," Alex whispered, his voice filled with relief. "I'm here." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for the briefest moment, Kira allowed herself to feel the overwhelming rush of emotion that had been building inside her for so long. She wasn't just relieved, she was free. She was no longer alone in this fight. And for the first time, she could truly embrace who she was. But before she could speak, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. They had been discovered. "Kira, we don't have much time," Alex said urgently. "We need to go. Now." With a nod, Kira grabbed his hand, and together, they sprinted down the hallways, the sound of their footsteps drowned out by the alarms blaring in their ears. They'd reached the escape route, but as they neared the airlock, the door slid open in front of them, revealing a group of Velaran enforcers. The last thing Kira wanted was a fight, but she had no choice now. Alex pulled her behind him, facing the enforcers. "We're leaving," he said, his voice steady but full of defiance. "You can't stop us." For a moment, the tension in the room was palpable. Kira felt her heart race, but it wasn't fear. It was something else, something she had never allowed herself to feel before. Hope. This was her fight now, too, and she wouldn't back down. The enforcers hesitated, uncertainty flashing in their eyes as they weighed their options. But before they could act, an explosion rocked the ship. The escape route had been compromised. Kira and Alex had no choice but to run, even deeper into the heart of the ship. As the alarms grew louder, Kira knew that the ultimate sacrifice was upon them. She had crossed the point of no return. Her future as a Velaran was gone, but her future with Alex, her future as someone who could feel and live freely, was just beginning. The new beginning. The sound of running footsteps echoed through the darkened hallways of the Velaran ship, and Kira's heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The explosion had thrown the ship into chaos, but Alex's daring escape plan had given them a slim window of opportunity. She could feel the weight of every step, the gravity of the situation sinking in as they sprinted down the twisting corridors, evading Velaran enforcers who were quickly closing in on them. Kira's mind raced. She had crossed the point of no return. There was no going back to the cold, orderly life she had once known. The Velaran authorities were relentless in their pursuit of anyone who broke their laws, and Kira had done more than that. She had broken the foundation of their entire society. And now, as the alarms blared louder with each passing second, she realized that everything, her life, her past, and her future, was up for grabs. Beside her, Alex was focused, his face set with determination. His presence gave her strength. There was no fear in his eyes, only the fire of someone who knew exactly what was at stake. They had no plan beyond escape, no contingency, no strategy to counter the entire Velaran fleet that could soon be after them. All they had was each other, and that was enough for Kira. It was the only thing she needed. "We're almost there," Alex muttered, glancing over his shoulder. His hand gripped hers firmly, pulling her forward as they neared the exit. "We just need to get to the shuttle bay, and we can leave this all behind." But as they rounded the corner, a powerful force slammed into them from the side. The door they had been heading for was blocked by Velaran enforcers, their black uniforms a sharp contrast to the flashing emergency lights that bathed the corridor in an eerie glow. Without a word, Alex stepped in front of Kira, pushing her behind him as his eyes locked on the enforcers. The tension in the air was thick. Kira could feel it in her chest, the adrenaline coursing through her veins. There was no time for hesitation. This was the moment that would define everything. "Move," Alex commanded, his voice low but filled with authority. The enforcers hesitated for only a moment, eyes flicking to the control panels of their wrist devices. But then one of them reached for his weapon, and Alex's body tensed, ready for action. In the split second before any movement could happen, Kira made her choice. She didn't want to be a passive participant in this. She had fought for her freedom, and she was ready to fight for it with everything she had. With a swift motion, she stepped forward, her hand outstretched, and her emotions, flooded by years of suppression, surged in an unstoppable wave. In that moment, her newfound sense of self, the power of human emotion, flowed into her every movement. She could feel the energy between her and Alex, an unspoken connection, as strong as any bond she had ever known. The Velaran enforcers were trained in combat, their reflexes faster and sharper than anything human, but they weren't prepared for the raw power of Kira's unleashed emotions. Her mind became a whirlwind, thoughts crashing together like thunder, and she reached out with everything inside her. Her anger, her hope, her fear, and let it explode. It wasn't just a physical push, it was a mental force, like a wave of energy that crashed into the enforcers, knocking them back with an overwhelming power. The force was enough to stun them, to send them tumbling into the walls, dazed and momentarily incapacitated. Kira's chest heaved as she stood there, stunned at what she had just done. The rush of emotions had filled her with an almost overwhelming energy, and for a moment, she felt both powerful and vulnerable. But then, Alex grabbed her arm, pulling her forward. "Now, Kira," he urged. "Now is our chance." They moved quickly, no longer looking back. Kira could hear the enforcers recovering, but by the time they reached the shuttle bay, the door slid open in front of them, revealing their escape vehicle. Alex's old cargo shuttle. It wasn't much, but it would take them far from the Valoran ship, far from the oppressive rules that had once confined her. They climbed into the shuttle, breathless but determined. Alex hurried to the controls, inputting the commands to launch them into space. Kira's gaze swept across the small cockpit, her mind still reeling from what had just happened. She had broken free. She had chosen to live. And now, as the engines hummed to life and the ship lifted off, she could feel the weight of everything she had left behind. For the first time in her life, Kira felt the full weight of her decision. She had betrayed her people, defied everything she had been taught, and yet she didn't regret a single moment of it. She had found something more precious than law and order. She had found herself. The shuttle soared into the starry expanse of space, the massive Valoran ship slowly receding in the distance. For the first time, Kira looked out into the vastness of the universe with a new sense of wonder. She was free, but the road ahead was uncertain. Alex leaned back in his seat, exhaling a sigh of relief. He glanced over at Kira, who was staring out the window, her face lit by the soft glow of distant stars. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes, but there was something else too, a quiet joy, a sense of peace. "We did it," Alex said quietly, breaking the silence. Kira turned to him, her expression softening. "Yes, we did." But even as she spoke, Kira knew that this was just the beginning. They weren't just running from the Velorans, they were running toward something. They were embarking on a new journey together, one where they would no longer be bound by the rules of a society that had never understood what it meant to feel, to truly live. They would make their own path, one where love, emotion, and connection were their guiding stars. And together, they would face whatever came next, whether it was the wrath of the Valoran authorities or the vast, uncharted territories of the universe itself. Kira reached out and took Alex's hand, squeezing it gently. This was their new beginning, and whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew they would face them together. As the shuttle hurtled through space toward an uncertain future, Kira felt something she had never truly experienced before: hope. A hope that no matter what happened, she would always have the strength to choose her own destiny. And that was enough.